So, hi everyone, welcome to Champions of the Future, and we continue our discussions about high performance sport, athlete development. I am Rishabh Jaiswal, and I head Athlete First Foundation. And today we have a very special guest, our mentor Tejaswin Shankar. For all of you who are still living in a parallel world and do not know who Tejaswin is, he is one of India's topmost athletes in athletics. He is the national record holder for high jump. He is the national record holder for decathlon. He's an Asian Games silver medalist, and he's just beginning to perform at a level which is going to take the Indian sport to the next stage. So Tejaswin, I think more about your journey, if it comes from directly from you, will be the best thing to do. So let me just deep dive into it straight away. The overall theme of this podcast, as we've discussed, is we are talking about high performance mindset, right? And we want the athletes watching, the fans watching, the supporters of sport, Indian sport, and potential donors to the Athlete First Foundation to understand directly from an elite athlete what high performance mindset is and how it works. But before that, let me just ask you, Tejaswin, first, welcome to the podcast. And what made you become a part of Athlete First Foundation as a mentor?
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you so much for having me and also for the generous introduction. The main reason why I wanted to associate with Athlete First Foundation is obviously because of your vision and the way you were able to pitch that idea to me. But at the same time, I think we need a lot more Athlete First foundations to try and help the next generation of athletes, because I think this idea, I don't know when this idea came to you, but for me, something like this I started thinking about after 2024, because right after the 2024 Olympics, there's a lot of chatter about how there's so much money being spent on athletes, but they're just not able to perform at the Olympic Games, or when big championships show up, a lot of our athletes tend to choke. And this was the narrative that was around us, and that really hurt me, because athletics is not like business where if you put in X amount of money, you're guaranteed X amount of return. I mean, sometimes it's purely out of passion, or I guess every time it's purely out of passion, and a lot of times you have to just burn a hole in your pocket and hope that something works out. So sports is not something that you aim for to try and get a return out of, but it's something that you're extremely passionate about, and you might just get lucky with a great performance. And when that happens, then you just count your blessings and move on and try to go to the next best performance. So that's what sport is all about for me. And I feel like that was a shared vision that you had, because you understood that it's not about the finances, but it's also about trying to actually felicitate good talent that's out there, try to see if they can make something, and most importantly, give them the proper direction, give them the proper channel, give them the proper opportunities which can increase their odds of performing well at a high level. And that's what I believe Sporting Ethos stands for. That's what Athletes First Foundation stands for, is try and give those small nuanced advices, those small important things that an athlete needs with respect to recovery, with respect to nutritional advice, sports science advice, because not everybody who works hard ends up getting the results that they want. Smart work in today's world is a lot more important than hard work. So that's something that I felt in our initial conversations you did understand, and that was one of my main reasons why I wanted to associate with Athletes First Foundation and see if we can make the water ripple, and if we can make a change in the Indian sporting ecosystem.
Wonderful. I think we've just started, but I must tell the audience that we some of the processes for selection are underway, and I think every time I interact with Tejaswin, I'll call you TJ. That's what they fondly call him, and sort of course, I think every interaction with you guys is a great learning experience. So TJ, let's dive into your journey. How did your journey in sports and athletics start? Just take us through right from the beginning.
Absolutely. So it was very organic for me. I went to Sardar Patel Vidyalaya, which is in Lodi Road. I was not born in Delhi, but I was brought up in Delhi since I was maybe 10 days old. I've been in Delhi all my life. I was born in Varanasi. That's where my mother's from. But went to school in Delhi. Had the normal public school life. The beauty of sport for me was I never chose sport. sport chose me. So that's how I like to look at it, because growing up, and this is, the right now, in today's world, LTAD is a very famous, lingo. Everybody likes to use long-term athletic development. There's models, there's all sorts of things. But I was lucky enough to naturally fall in that LTAD program, where growing up, my parents never wanted me to do one particular thing. The family environment that we had, I grew up learning the tabla. I learned how to sing. Now, if you ask me to sing, I'm not going to do that. But learned how to sing. Played various sports. Started with swimming, then went on to play tennis. Played a lot of cricket. That's still my favorite sport. And eventually, athletics chose me, because I think this was around 8th standard. In school, when I was running behind a cricket ball, and there was a new athletics coach that came to, he joined our school, and then he said, you run very well, and you're tall, you have, decent height for an 8th standard student, so why don't you try and do athletics? I said, well, but I've never, heard about this sport, and is it a good sport? Then I came back home and I told my dad I want to do athletics, and he said, ye athletics वगैरह सब कुछ नहीं करना, it's a doping sport. Then that was the first interaction with doping, learning what doping was, understanding what it is. And now when I look back, it tells me what a normal middle class parent thought of that sport at that time. And this was, I don't know, maybe like 15 years ago, 14 years ago. And to this day, I think, to be extremely honest, not a lot has changed. So my dad was extremely right in saying that, this is a sport where doping athletes go. Even though the sport is not at fault, it's the people that are at fault. But that was the opinion that had formed in the general public's mind. And he said, if you want to play cricket, I can help you get to the highest levels. You play cricket, you do your studies, and that's what's most important for me. And this is how my journey in athletics started, where during lunch breaks, I started, not necessarily training, but dabbling with high jumping, long jumping, because our school had that setup. And my coach was very passionate, and he wanted me to do this because he thought that I could do really well. For me, it was more of I would say, as a 9th standard athlete, more of a publicity stunt, because all the girls in my school at that time wanted to see, oh, who's this guy running and jumping? That was my popularity stunt. So that's how I got into sport, because one, I was popular in school as a teenager, as a early teenager, and two, at the zonal level, state level, I was winning medals for the school. So every Wednesday morning at the school assembly, they'd call me up to stage and give me my medal, and that'll be a big flex for me, because growing up, those are the things that matter. And going back to principles of LTAD, there was no specialization happening here. It was just having fun with the sport and doing things that you love. And later on, when I had a chat with my coach, my first coach in school, and again, like, he's not, a sports scientist, or he's not a PhD holder or anything, just a school physical education teacher. But he understood that growing up, I don't want my kid to become the next Olympic champion. I just want to do enough to where, in principles of fishing, when you throw the bait, you wait for the fish to catch the bait. You don't force the bait down the fish's throat. Right. So he wanted me to eventually catch the bait, because every lunch break when I'd go and do certain heights, he'd say, "Arey, this is looking so good," even though I might be looking rubbish. But he'd say, "Oh, this is so good. You're looking fantastic." And the next day I would want to do a little bit more. The next day I'd want to do a little bit more. So he was luring me in. And one fine day when I caught the bait, I said, "You know what? This is what I want to do. I'm happy to fight with my dad. I'm happy to fight with my family. I'm happy to come early morning to train, or do structured practice. I'm happy to stay back after school." That's when he realized, okay, now the fish is caught. Now we're going to slowly try and make instrumental changes to where we can try and support this kid's journey to the next level, without imposing our idea of, okay, now you're going to be the next Usain Bolt. So that's how my journey started, where it started with a lot of fun, a lot of doing various activities, high jumping, long jumping, triple jumping, running, sprinting, all of those things. And eventually high jump found me, and that's when, I had my early success. And as the story goes, later on I switched from high jump to the combined event. So we'll talk more about that in a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think more to talk about that. But I think one interesting thing, couple of interesting things, I think the coach's eye for talent, I think that is something which a few coaches have a knack of. So I think definitely, I think you are lucky to have someone kind of see you running and understand and, come and talk to you. It's similar, like, probably the MS Dhoni story where his school coach, kind of looked at him and said, "Okay, you're a goalkeeper. You might be suited to wicket keeping." Definitely, it can be much more structured. But I mean, that tells us that we do have very well-meaning coaches with a very good eye, and if we can be a more kind of a structured environment around that, that would be great. The other thing, because we're talking about mindset, you mentioned about being the next Usain Bolt or next, let's say, Serena Williams. Is it is it a trap into which sometimes parents, we will talk about athlete high performance mindset, but obviously parents wish the best for their child and they want them to achieve the maximum and facilitate that, and it's coming from a place of a lot of love, so so it's coming from a lot of place of love, but do you think having those kind of ambitions when you're starting off your journey in sport, are they do they motivate an athlete, or do you think sometimes it's too unrealistic or the pressure is too much to be able to aspire to be at that level? How do you see that?
So there's two things to this. If we look at it from a parent's lens, I think it's completely unrealistic for a parent to have expectations from their child, especially for your kid who's just started cricket to be the next Virat Kohli. There's one in a million Virat Kohlis or one in a million Neeraj Chopras that end up becoming those figures, and 9 out of 10 times even those figures become that person because they never thought about being. So Neeraj never thought about being the best javelin thrower in the world. He probably started off playing cricket. Similarly with Virat Kohli, he just wanted to have fun, did something. Eventually he became the greatest of all time, which they figured out, and their parents didn't impose that idea on them. So there's very few parents who impose their idea of something on their child and that becomes a success. You might obviously have a Tiger Woods, you might have a Yuvraj Singh for that matter, you might have a Serena Williams, but then for every for every Tiger Woods, there's 1,000 kids who ended up losing passion for sport, losing all interest for sport just because of that one instance, or that 1 year where the burden of expectations was so high for a 9, 10, 11-year-old child that it just became extremely difficult.
Right.
That is for me from a parent standpoint. But as a child growing up, that's the whole reason why you put up a picture of a Sachin Tendulkar on your wall, or a Yuvraj Singh on your wall, or a Neeraj Chopra on your wall, because you want to be that. And as a child, you should be allowed to dream.
Right.
As a parent, you want to facilitate that dreaming process. If they want to do 3-4 sessions a day, if they want to go and join a training club, you want to try and help your child achieve that goal while balancing their academics, but not at the cost of your dream of it's high or die. I'm spending so much on you, we're going to tennis classes, why are you not performing? So I think it's a two-way street where the child should be allowed to dream, because for me, sport is, again, like obviously just like in any other field, everybody that does a bachelor's degree in business doesn't end up becoming a Ambani or a Bill Gates, right? So similarly in sport, just because you're going and training, just because you're in a high performance environment, you're really great at 14, 16, 18, doesn't mean you're going to go and become the next Virat Kohli. So that's how sport is. But most people don't tend to, they tend to think of it from the other lens, that I might be in that 1%. But 9 out of 10 times that doesn't happen. So for me, sport is very organic, to where every child should have the right to play. And sport chooses you if you're going to be the next, the greatest of all time or not. But if you're not that doesn't mean sport is a failure for you. Sport teaches you so many, skills in life, soft skills, hard skills. There's so many interviews that I've been able to crack, not because of my technical knowledge, but just because I know how to interact with people, having the soft skills, having the understanding that failure is inevitable. It's going to happen to you in some point in life, but learning how to overcome that and using that to your strength so that tomorrow you can, try and become something else, try and work towards a different goal. These are all soft skills that learning how to lose. So a lot of skills that sport teaches you, learning to be in a team environment. So there's so many things that you can learn from sport, and it's not just about winning or losing.
Right.
And as a young kid, you can't explain all these things to a 15-year-old child. For them, it's about winning and losing, and that's how it should be for them. But the parents know better. They are 30, they're in their mid 40s, so they understand these things a little bit more better. So for them to impose their idea of what, this is how things should be done, and if you're not doing X by the time you're 14 years old, or if you haven't made top 2% in India by the time you're 18 years old, then I feel like those ideas of high performance are I don't align with those ideas, to be specific.
Yeah, so I think it's a very valid point. I mean, the role of a parent is always, I think, a facilitator first. But there are emotions involved, and there is, I think. But yeah, that's my conversation always with parents, that it's not exactly a return on investment thing. The young kids are playing sport for the joy of it. And then if they're really keen and they want to take it forward, it's their job would be to help them do it in the best possible manner, and then let it upon the athletes. The other thing you mentioned, about having life skills, getting through interviews, or having success in communication in different in aspects of life. And that takes, and let's take our story forward then. Definitely sport helps. I think all of us agree it gives you a lot of life skills. And I think no matter what level you played at, even if you play at a club level or a your school level and you play sport, I think it does teach you a lot of things. But where does and you did mention balancing academics, etc. So going forward in your journey, you went to the United States to pursue college. And how much has education also impacted this overall development of life skills? And why do you stress on the academic part also for an athlete?
Yeah, so for me, growing up, academics was very secondary, because obviously I was, showing a lot of talent in sport. But as I went to the US on a collegiate scholarship, the whole rule there is you're a student athlete. So student comes before athlete. You might be the Mondo Duplantis of the world, and you might be the best in what you do, but you still have to go and give your exams the next day. If you broke the world record the previous day, good and fine, but you have a beer and next morning you go and give your exam. That's how the collegiate system is structured. Right. So you're a student before you're an athlete. For me, that environment was very new, because in India growing up, obviously my school was, it sheltered me a little bit, but mostly when I was at a stadium or when I was in a practice facility, the environment was such that, okay, now if you're in 10th standard, this is your deciding factor, or maybe 11th, ke bhai, it's either school or sport from this point on. If you want to be a high performance athlete, then you have to attend national camps, you have to, do this, that, and all that sort of thing. And school will take care of itself. Eventually, if you enroll in a university, and let's face the reality, you're going to get a degree, it doesn't matter if you attend classes or not. Right. Eventually, things are going to get figured out from an academic side of things. But if you want to pursue sport, then it has to be all in or all out after maybe 10th. Similarly, in academics, the system is such that 10th is where you start branching off. If you want to do medicine, then you probably end up taking NEET classes. Otherwise, it's IIT, JEE exams, and that sort of thing. So you're forced to choose a path very early on in life. So I chose that path early on in life. I was in 10th, even though my parents were extremely reluctant, and they said, what, and my principal had a chat with my parents. They said, no, I'm not going to allow your child to skip 12th exams, 10th exam. And I bit the bullet with limited amount of studying, whatever it is. I cleared my 12th exam. I got about 80% or so, and that's fine. At that time, I felt like I was the biggest failure in life, because I got 80%, but all of my peers had 98, 97, and they were still struggling to get into college, because obviously Delhi University cutoff is 99.9. So then I was sitting here thinking, "Arey bhai, 80 wale ka kya hoga?" So that's when the US opportunity popped up, and after going there, I realized that there's so much to do outside of sport in academics. And the point that I'm trying to make is, before this we had the conversation about how sports gives you all these skills of teamwork, all that sort of thing. But if you're not educated enough to understand those skills that you're getting, or actually able to harness those qualities or identify those qualities, you'll never be able to inculcate that in your life, because you don't even know what you're doing. So you show up to practice, you're jumping, you're running, then you come back. For a normal person, without understanding of what they're doing, that's what it is. But the moment you're educated, the moment you go to class, the moment your brain is stimulated in multiple directions, then the same running for you, now you start understanding the intensity behind the running. Now you start understanding the physiology behind the science used in planning a certain workout. Now you have to run 10 tempo runs at 80%. I will question the coach. Why is this 80% at this time of the year, and why is it not 75%? Right. Okay, the reason this is 80% is because we are trying to channel a certain physiological system and also or a certain energy system, and when we do 75% intensity, now we are trying to channelize a certain physiological system. So these are, now it opens up a whole Pandora's box of, how exciting sports is, because it's not just showing up to the track and running, but there's a lot of science involved behind why we are doing what we are doing, why we run, and why we do a warm up and then we go and do our activity. Why can't we do our activity and then warm up? These are all generally accepted ideas, that we have to warm up before we do any activity. But why? And those questions is what I feel being educated answers. And I was lucky enough to go through formal education and apply, what I learned in school. So for example, I did my bachelor's in accountancy.
Right.
I never understood the cost behind sports. For me, sport was free always, because you show up, you have your pair of spikes, you put it on, you go and jump.
Yes.
But once you end up becoming a professional athlete, you have to start looking at your finances. Okay, now I have to go and plan a training camp in, let's say, South Africa for 3 months. Where is the money coming from? So those are all things that you have to try and, make a budget. Even if you have a sponsor who's helping you out, you need to be able to communicate to them, This is what I want to do. This is exactly how much it's going to cost. And this is where I think you'll be able to help me, because if I come to you, I say, help me, you'll say, Arey, but how?
Exactly.
So I need to be able to ask what I want. And those are things that I feel formal education was really important in teaching me. Yes, the technical skills are important. Maybe today I'm not using any of my accountancy technical skills, but being in that formal environment where I'm with my fellow students, going through that development, at the same time competing at a high level, and being able to ultimately manage all of this under that 24-hour bracket which everybody has, that's the most important thing I feel of going through your proper education, at least getting through your bachelor's degree, and then trying to see how all these things transcends into your sporting abilities.
So one of the things, early on when I founded Sporting Ethos and I was doing my research and I had gone to Australia, and one of the feedback which was given to me was that, as you mentioned, you're never a full-time athlete, because very few athletes get the sponsorships or the scholarships. So they are almost always studying a little bit alongside, or they are working alongside. And the feedback I got from some of the athletes there who were, college level students, and even the coaches, was that it served almost as a very good distraction of sorts from, rather than thinking about training all day. So do you think that happened in your case as well? Do you think it is an important let off, or maybe not a distraction, but something else you're doing besides sport which actually enables you to perform better or train better?
No, that's actually very true, because training happens maybe 2 to 3 hours a day. Obviously you can't train more than 3-4 hours a day, because then, yes, there are people who are going to be out there and saying, Kobe Bryant shot basketballs for 3 hours a day, and then he did his skill training, then he did his conditioning. But as a 400-meter runner, can I run for 3 hours? No, it's not going to happen, because physically it's not possible. So yes, a skill is different. Yes, I can stand and maybe do some easy javelin throws with my shoulder. I can do maybe 10 of those, but even after that, there's a certain implication that's going to happen to my body. So every sport is different. You have to understand why you're doing what you're doing. So talking about specifically track and field, you can't train for more than 3, maximum 4 hours a day. You still have 20 hours. So what are you going to do about that? Are you going to think about the sport that you're doing? Okay, fine, great. But then after a few days, after a few months, it's going to get too much. And right now we're sitting in December. Imagine you have your 4 months. Now you're in March. Your season still hasn't started, and you've gone through a lot of training, and more so a lot of thinking. So now when the competition season actually starts, you're burnt out even before you've done anything on the track, because you've thought about so much of skill, this is what I'm going to do, XYZ, but now you're burnt out. There's no distraction. You're at a point where you're going to try and extrinsically find motivation to push you. So these are all things that have to be managed, and it's very difficult when you don't have any other activity outside of just sport to try and improve in sport. As counterintuitive as it might sound, you have to have that time off. You have to learn how to switch off the switch, because if you always have the switch on, there's going to be a time when the current is going to go away, and or the bulb is going to explode. So you have to try and find, and this is what the whole philosophy of peaking is all about, trying to identify those few pockets of performance where I want to be the best that I can on the day of the Asian Games final or the Olympic Games final. I don't have to run 958 every day of my life. If I run that one day on that given day, if I'm able to do that, that's what determines my ability to do it. Because if I can do it the day before and the day after, but if I miss out on that one particular opportunity, which should be the Asian Games or the Olympic Games final, then that performance doesn't really matter in terms of a medal, because ultimately that's what you're aiming for, especially at high level sport. Now we're not talking about little TJ running around trying to high jump. Now we're talking about the TJ who's aiming for an Asian Games or an Olympic podium. Then it becomes a completely different story, because now the path has chosen you. Now the sport has chosen you to be the next chosen one. So do you think you're the next chosen one? If you are, then you're going to do all those things that's going to try and put you in that spot on that given day. And that's what I think sport is all about. So sometimes if you have to take a step back, sometimes if you have to turn the switch on, you or the switch off, you must do that for the sake of the greater goal, which is that one day in, let's say, 3rd of October, when the Asian Games Day 2 decathlon is going to happen. That's when I want to be ready. I can be in the best shape of my life in December, but this is good for me. It's not going to make a huge difference, because everybody might be doing something, and in those next 9-10 months people are going to figure things out. So how can I be in that position on that given day is what I think sport is all about at the highest level, rather than trying to be healthy and fit throughout the year, and it turns out when that one day comes around you're not able to perform at your highest. Something else that I want to point out is, outside of India, I don't know if there's any other countries where athletes have the same lifestyle as Indian athletes. This might raise a lot of eyebrows, but like you correctly pointed out, most collegiate level athletes, or athletes who are under the age of 25, either go to university or do some sort of a part-time job. And this is, again, we are talking about your normal athletes. And when I say normal, people who have made it to the Olympic Games.
Right.
I'm not talking about your Olympic gold medalists. For them, life's a little bit different, because obviously they've achieved what they have. But even someone who goes to the Olympic Games once in 4 years, they're part of the national team, they're one of the top 36 in the world. Some of them still have to do part-time jobs. Some of them are, they're working as, whatever, librarian or something like that, while they manage their sport, while they do their training for 3-4 hours, 5 hours, whatever it might look like for the rest of the time. Indian athletes, on the other hand, have a structure where you have, national camps for the whole year. I don't know if there's any other country who has national camps for the whole year. At max, they might have 3 months right before a major championships, and that's it. That's more than enough. But a lot of our athletes, we enjoy the luxury of being full-time athletes, where a lot of these countries who we are trying to compete against, okay, let's take out China from this example because they're a little bit different, but talking about any of the Western countries, they don't enjoy this luxury of being full-time athletes, except for those few examples that we might see on Instagram. The majority does not. So since we have that opportunity, yes, for anybody who's giving you that opportunity, they'll say, "Arey, but you're able to train for 24 hours a day, you have everything sorted, then what's the problem? Why are we not performing at a high level?" But I think the counterintuitiveness of this is because you have that the whole time, it becomes too much sport. And you don't want that to happen, because then you don't have that balance. And the moment you don't have that balance, then the whole status quo changes, and that results in a dip in performance.
Right, and I think now with the advent of online courses, etc., at least you can keep learning and building your skills. Right, I think one thing I see about Saurav now at this stage of his career, and I think for you maybe 10 years, 15 years down the line, that the skill sets you guys have acquired in terms of both sport and non-sport and education and the life skills will really hold you in good stead. And there is, for every athlete, there's a second career. So at the end of the day, if you're doing even the basic minimum 5-10% to set up your career after sport, I think that's putting you in a very good place. Now I want to get into the thick of things, but the conversation is so interesting. But one thing I want to ask you, because I think it's a mindset question as well. You mentioned challenging the coach, asking them why is it 80%, why it's not 70%. In India, the relationship between a coach and an athlete, it's a guru-shishya relationship. It's very sacrosanct. And invariably, athletes would probably never even think of questioning or challenging their coach. However, I feel sometimes in that scenario, when you're not able to, I will not say challenging is the right word, but let's say discuss things, or at least ask questions. You may be losing out on the optimum amount of training or performance. If you've read something, you've thought of something, you've discussed something, let's say with a strength and conditioning coach, and they have a differing opinion than your coach. How do we change this without eliminating or removing the respect? I think respect is very important part of it. We should always respect our elders, our coaches. How do you see that? Because I feel that not being able to discuss, having that openness or the freedom to discuss something with your coaches, give them the feedback or ask them for detailed feedback, not just for athletes but even the younger athletes' parents, sometimes is coming in the way of the optimum level of development.
Yeah. So for me, I think the biggest litmus test to see if a coach is somebody that I want to work with or not is if I'm able to have a conversation with them, if I can, ask a few questions, and depending on how they respond, if they get offended, that's my litmus test to see if this is the person that I want to work with or not. I understand the Guru Shishya Parampara, but ultimately I think it comes from the coach, because the coach drives the kind of environment that they want the athlete to be in. The athlete is always young, they're obviously, most of the coaches, 99% of the coaches are older than the athlete. So yes, they have a lot of experience, they've seen a lot of other athletes, but if they can't have that environment where they let the athlete come to them, and it doesn't have to be questioning, it can easily be, trying to sort something together, giving the athlete the space to where they can ask certain questions. I think that's extremely important, because over the course of time, if you don't have that relationship with your athlete, and it's just fear is the main reason, or respect, as you might call it, if that's the main incentive for the athlete to do well, then I believe over a course of time, that's when your relationships start getting sour. As the athlete grows, as the coach gets older, it becomes very difficult for them to manage their athletes, because now in that same training group you have somebody who's an Olympic athlete, and you also have somebody who's a grassroots athlete. How you treat or have a conversation with your grassroots athlete is very different than how you treat or have a conversation with your Olympic level athlete. It can't be exactly the same, because the Olympic level athlete has probably been in your training system for the last 5 to 10 years, but the grassroots athlete probably just came in. So as a grassroots athlete, obviously I'm not going to give that kid the same freedom as, they come in, question, but then they have to understand why we are doing what we're doing. So you have to, as an athlete, earn your right to ask the questions, because that shows, one, your preparedness, but two, the fact that you've at least followed the plan to a certain level or a certain point to where now you've earned your right to ask the questions. But as a coach, if I don't give my athletes the freedom to use their own brain, or the freedom to think outside the box, then I think it becomes very difficult, because now you're not producing individually thinking champions, now you're producing robots. The problem with robots is, unless you don't have somebody who's going to go and fix, their battery every now and then, they're going to function the same way. Right. But on the mat or on the field or on the pitch,
we need to adapt.
The coach is not going to be there. Yeah. I might want my athlete to do whatever it might look like, but in that given moment, that split second difference, so we were just talking about this before the podcast, is how, the elite athletes, some of the best in the world, are able to make those adjustments on the fly to the point where it looks very natural and mechanical. But you can't expect that from factory made athletes, because they will keep looking back at the coach for signals. They will keep looking for them for advice, because at that clutch moment, if you've never used your brain, it becomes very difficult to be able to do certain things, which is what sport demands, is dynamic thinking on your toes. So that's where I think a coach, if they're able to drive this atmosphere where the athlete is welcome to ask questions, they're welcome to navigate things, as long as there's a mutual respect, there's a mutual understanding. And I think this is extremely important as we look at the future of Indian sport. Having that relationship with coaches would change a lot of things, especially with the mindset, because then you're promoting your athletes to be more confident, and this is what reflects in their sport. It's not just about following the orders. Now you're not trying to produce robots, you're trying to produce champions who are trying to be the 1% in the world, or maybe even 1% in world history. So for that to happen, there has to be something different about them. If everybody is the same, then how can you expect them to produce different results? So
no, exactly. I mean, the same thing we do, and the culture at Athlete First Foundation and Sporting Ethos is that any athlete at any level, I always encourage them to ask the team they're working with any kind of questions. It's a professional's job to respond with logic, with reasoning, and in the case of sports sciences, with research. And I think that's every athlete's right. So I think creating that culture is important. You asked me this question, that what do I see before the podcast in top athletes, which I feel is one of the outstanding qualities or an overarching quality. Let me ask you that question. That fellow top athletes you've interacted with, or when you were kind of getting to that stage, you were at the pre-elite level. What qualities did you see, right? And also what qualities which now you feel that you've acquired, or in the almost acquired, and is very important from a mindset perspective. If you can just give us a perspective of that.
So, I think the one thing that does stand out for me, and again, like we have to make this differentiator that now we're not talking about long term athletic development, grassroots athletes, we're talking about elite professionals for whom this is life and death.
Right.
So the one thing that does stand out for me, and I don't know how coachable this is or not, is BGT, big game temperament. All the athletes or the superstars of the world that I have had the opportunity to either interact with or see live or even see on TV or watch documentaries on, have this thing called big game temperament, which is in that given moment when all the odds are stacked against you, somehow they are able to figure out a way which nobody can ever coach you. Somehow you're able to figure something out, you're able to dig so deep within that you're able to come out of that situation and use all the odds stacked against you in your favor, and eventually you overturn the whole decision and then you end up winning. So that to me, and this might be instances where Neeraj Chopra won the Olympic gold, all the odds were stacked against him. This might be a Kobe Bryant, a Michael Jordan, this might be a Virat Kohli. So these are some of the names that come to my mind, and I think the BGT is what really stands out to me.
Can you train for BGT?
Also, this is the question that I'm still thinking with all my years in sport. I still haven't found the right answer. Partly yes, because this is where I think the more you're able to understand yourself as a person, because obviously what you're doing on the pitch or on the court is a skill that you acquire over time. But then if you don't know who you are as a person, you have to understand your limits. You have to know what is that limit to the point where I can dig deep. And once you identify that limit, that's when you can go and dig deeper. So for me, you have to identify your ceiling, and that comes from a lot of self-awareness, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of knowing about yourself outside of the sport. A lot of people, and this is where I think sports psychology is something that I really look up to, because it's a very niche field to where not everybody might need it. There might be some people who might be very natural in understanding themselves or have a very good understanding about themselves. There might be some people who might need a psychologist or a sports mental consultant is what they call them. So you might need somebody like a Paddy Upton or whoever it is, who a performance coach, to try and help you dig deeper. But ultimately it's on you to figure out which path you want to go to, because just because you have a sports psychologist doesn't mean you're gonna make the most of them or they're gonna help you achieve the next level, because these things are very, very intrinsic. Now you're trying to chase 1%, but to try and identify that next 1%, you have to probably make that journey from 0 to 99, and that's on you. And this is where such services, they become extremely nuanced, and the athlete has to drive. Because I feel just because now there's sports psychologists, and a lot of parents, when their kids is 14, 16 year old, they're like, "Arey, but I want to go and do monthly sports psychologist sessions." But for me at that point, it's probably like, well, I think as a 16-year-old teenager, they probably need a general psychologist to help them navigate their feeling, or they just need to be left alone to try and deal with their emotions. And then as we get into higher levels of sport, we understand. So I think with BGT, it can be trained if you are somebody who is willing to talk to a sports psychologist, or if you have able to find that one match with a psychologist, or with somebody who's able to guide you with those cues, with being able to understand yourself. Or if you're a natural, that can also work. But again, this is the question that I keep dabbling with, is if it's trainable or not. But ultimately at that level, if you're talking about Asian Games final, or if you're talking about a Commonwealth Games, Olympic Games final, the 8 people that sit in your starting block for the final race, there's nothing physical that really truly separates them. Because at that point, if you're in the top 8 in the world, then you're arguably about give or take same situation, physically same amount of preparedness, you've had the funding, so now all these things are not a problem. Now the one thing that comes down to is how bad do you want it, and how deep can you dig to achieve that particular result, not just on that given day, but time and again. And that's what separates, I think, a champion from a truly outstanding generational talent. And that's where I think, I don't know how much of this is trainable, how much of this is not trainable, but I think it's a good thought for our viewers to also maybe try and comment and see if what they feel about this. So
I would imagine that while there is an innate part to it, there is a natural ability. A lot of the names you mentioned have been through. I don't think they started performing clutch, right from a young level. They might have instances, of course, which they have shown through their innate ability. But I'm imagining without them knowing sometimes, or sometimes working on it in a planned way, they have developed that ability to, even on a bad day, be at a certain level. So that they are able to kind of give this kind of a clutch
this is
performance.
why, like, this is the 1% in sport that we're always caught up with, we talk about, but then we always forget that to get to that last 1% you have to go from 0 to 99. So these are the people who've probably put in the hours, or had structured planned practices. They've spent time with their implement, with their sport for so many years, and now when we look at them, that last 1%, it looks like when Steph Curry puts a ball in after a 3-pointer, it looks like magic, it looks so easy. But then that's the 0 to 99 they've covered, and we look at the 1% and we say, "Arey, but had he done this, he could have been this." But well, what about the 0 to 99? So that's also something that we need to look at.
All right, now let me get to a very cliched but often used phrase in high performance sport: trust the process. You see it on t-shirts, you see a lot of people using it. Sometimes may not be understanding, but even if you see a lot of top athletes interviews, they always talk about their process. They always. So can you explain to the athletes watching, or to the audience watching, from your perspective as an elite athlete, what is process and why should you trust it?
Absolutely. So to give a little bit of context to some of the younger viewers, younger athletes, parents in sport, I am about 27. I just turned 27 a few days back. Yes. Thank you. So about 27 years old now. I've been in sport for about, I would say, 12 years, doing structured professional training for about 8 years. I've won a Commonwealth Games medal, Asian Games medal, multiple Asian Championships medal. I hold 2 national records. But even now, when I watch interviews or listen to athletes talk about trusting the process, I still don't know what that means. So for me to comment for a 16-year-old, or for me to expect a 16-year-old to watch an interview and understand what that means, I'm not going to do that, because it's not possible. I'm still figuring it out. And if I ask, some of the best athletes, I'd probably say they're still figuring it out, because a lot of this lingo that we listen to is acquired from some of the other interviews, and we borrow it and we just paste it in the next interview that we give. Right. But for me, over the course of all these years, all this experience that I have been able to gain is identifying, and this is where, again, going back to the previous conversation of how well do you know yourself. You don't have to know anybody else. You don't have to know your sport. How well do you know yourself? Can you sit with yourself for 5 hours or 3 hours a day? Some people call it meditation. Some people call it dhyan. But bottom line is, are you able to sit with yourself and really understand who you are? Because if you don't know that, you're never going to be able to dig deep. So the whole understanding of this is, if you have that feeling, or if you know what you're doing, and I think I'm kind of digressing from the whole question. Can you repeat the question?
No, the whole question is about process, right?
Yeah. So to understand the process, I think you just have to try and iron out a few key things. Number one is, what are my practice times? Number one is, what do I really want to accomplish from this sport? Number two is, why am I doing all these things? What's the whole incentive for me to do this? Right. Because there's a reason why somebody does something. For me, it might be medals. For somebody else, it might be, running away from life problems, whatever it might be. So the process is something that before following it, you have to really define what that is, what that looks for you. For somebody else, it might look very different. But that's what takes time and understanding. And when you have ironed out those few things, you know what works for you. And then once you know that process, once you've identified those few key nuances, that's when you start trusting it, because now at least you have a definition of a process. It's very easy for me to go and say, chalo yaar, follow the process. But but what is the process? What does that mean? Right. For my sport, it might look very different to what your sports process looks like. And this is where I think, as a young athlete, you have to have a certain routine. Ultimately, it comes down to having a routine. If it's going to school, if it's going to, practice, whatever it is. For some people, going to school and then going to practice and then going to lunch break, all these things might be part of the process. Right. The whole idea with the process is trying to identify A, B, C, D things which help you, have a path, have some sort of a navigation system is what the process is for me.
Right.
Where you're not digressing every day and navigating like a ship without a captain.
Right.
The process is the captain of your ship. Once you have the captain ironed out, once you know exactly what the kind of person or what the kind of process looks like, then you just have to blindly follow it till the point you get a result. And it's very important to keep updating the process depending on where you're at and what your current goal is. Because just because I've made a process doesn't mean it can't change. It has to change if it needs to change, and if it's in the next month or if it's in 5 years, it doesn't make a difference. But if you're not critical or aware enough to try and identify those loopholes to try and make the process perfect, because ultimately it's never going to be perfect, but you can always try and identify certain things that can eventually make your process perfect. This talk is very superficial right now, but if I have to really go into the details, let's take my example. So this morning I woke up, let's say I woke up at 9. I didn't have a morning session. All I have is an evening session today. I did my evening session. I'm here for the podcast. I'm going to do my evening session after this, and then I'm going to go to bed. That's my given day. Now, if I have to identify the process in this day, what are some of the loopholes? As an elite athlete who's sitting here, am I concerned about my hydration? In this 1 hour conversation, I have to make sure that I'm drinking at least a few bottles of water, which is eventually gonna at least make sure that, again, we're just talking about one day, which is gonna make sure that when I go, and I'm sitting here for the last 1 hour. So now I have to do something after this to make sure that I'm ready for my practice session. That's also something that needs to keep, be there in the back of my mind. This morning when I woke up, did I take my supplements that usually that 1 a day supplement or whatever it is that I take? Did I take that this morning just because I was in a hurry, because I woke up a little bit late? Did I have my breakfast that I usually have, which always in this particular session helps me get the certain amounts of carbs and whatever it is to get me through that particular training session? Once I'm done with this podcast, will I have enough time to go home, get all my stuff, and still be able to think about what I'm going to do in practice rather than just showing up to practice? Do I have my notes aligned exactly for what I need to accomplish in today's practice, the micro goals that I have for this particular session? Do I have the 5 minutes to sit and reflect with those goals before I go and do what I'm supposed to do? After the session, even during the session, do I have the adequate time to go through my complete warm-up routine, or just because the gym is going to close or because I get out of here 5 minutes late, I have to cut through my warm-up so that I can quickly get to my lift? So these are all those small nuances that this is just a 1 day plan, and now we haven't even gotten to what happens after training, then I go to bed and how many hours of sleep. These are the small things that you look at in one given day. Now imagine what happens when you compound these things over a month period, over a 3 month, 6 month, 1 year, 4 year period. There's a lot of things that can happen, but for that you have to identify what exactly that is, if it's working for you or if it's just unnecessary data. And at the same time, if it's working for you, then how committed are you to do those small, nuanced, boring things every day? Because that's what's going to separate you from sixth place to second place.
Is it only commitment though? Because repeating this over and over again, do you think commitment is enough? What is it that, why would TJ do it again and again and again? Is it only commitment or what else?
Well, I am an athlete and I'm extremely selfish. I want to win a medal at the end of 4 years. I want to be one of those 36 people who go to the Olympic Games. I want to be that one person who's able to stand at the top of the podium and say that I'm the greatest athlete in the world. And that is my whole incentive. I think that's incentive big enough, because my ego is bigger than anything else. And if I want to fuel my ego, if I can talk a big game, then I want to walk that big game. And this is, to me, is bigger than any commitment, because here I'm talking about, I'm not trying to prove anybody wrong. I'm trying to prove my own ego wrong. So now the competition is with myself. So there's no point in committing to the process or anything like that, because now it's bigger than any commitment, because I'm now fighting against myself. So if I can't even prove my own goals right, then what's the point of me sitting here and preaching the rest of the world that you should do this, you should do that? So,
do you enjoy it or do you hate it? Very simple. I'm just simplifying it too much, but it's important to ask because I'm guessing a lot of this what you mentioned sounds like a great amount of detail to follow every day, but I think it's become second nature for you. So do you enjoy doing this? Do you not have any feelings towards this, or do you say, okay, I hate this part of it?
But I think it's just like brushing your teeth every morning. Do you enjoy it?
Exactly.
Maybe you just don't care about it because it's
So it is
something that
second
you have
nature.
to do. So it has to get to a point where it's second nature.
Yeah.
But in order to get to that point, and that's where the process starts looking very different for everybody, because for a Kobe, talking about this would be very different.
Yeah.
And for him, that is second nature. And when you ask him this question, he'll probably look at you and say, "Arey, but what do you mean?"
What do you mean?
But for me, listening from the outside, I'm like, "Arey, why our process, all these sort of things, all fancy words." But then I really don't understand the depth of what he means, because that particular thing is so ingrained in that person. So maybe for me, something's very ingrained, which listening from the outside would look like, "Arey, but this is too much." But for me, it's like brushing my teeth. I mean, yes, it's an added task every morning, but do you think about it? No. Even you might be in the extreme hurry of your life, but you still go quickly, find that time to brush your teeth, and then you move on.
Right.
So this is what I'm trying to encourage younger athletes to try and identify their own process. Just because I'm talking here, sitting about brushing my teeth and all that sort of things, that doesn't mean they have to do it, but they have to identify those few key things which they do over and over and over and over again. And once that happens, that's when they'll have found their own process and would have been able to achieve that. So if you're a professional athlete, if you've taken that commitment, if you've taken that leap of faith that this is what I want to do, then all these things come hand in hand. Just because you want to hold the medal and have that one picture at the end of the 4-year cycle, these are all the things that you have to go through. And I wouldn't say go through, but these are all the things that you must enjoy and do, because this is what's going to get you to that level.
So I think if I have to articulate what you're saying, and from my understanding, in a more simplified fashion, would be that processes are basically routines which are controllable by you, which you can execute on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, based on what improving or excelling in your sport requires. And that may change based on the goals you set for that particular duration of time. Would that be somewhere?
Yeah, I think you put it better than what I said. So I think you've been able to really hit all the topics that I was trying to cover.
But it's important to hear from you, because I guess the reason why you explained it as an everyday routine is the reason because it's your second nature. So I think for you it's not. For me, it's more of a I would say theoretical thing to be able to counsel an athlete and tell them. But for you as an active athlete, it's something you do on a daily basis. So I think that's so.
And this is where having somebody who's done it or really understand the nuances makes a difference. Because let's say, for example, my parents and my uncle, both of them go to office every morning. So for them, if they discuss among themselves that I have to wake up at 9 in the morning, then I have a meeting at 9:15, it makes perfect sense to them, because everybody is in that lifestyle, and for them that's the normal.
Right.
But for me to go and tell my uncle that I have to wake up at 6 tomorrow morning, I have a gym session, and then after that at 7:30 I'll have coffee, and then 8:30 I'll go to class. The first reaction would be, "Arey, 6:30, that's too early, yaar. I wake up at 9." But for me, if I tell that to another athlete who's in that same environment, it's very normal. Arey, 6:30, chalo yaar, we have to make sure that we are up by 6:15 so that we hit the gym at 6:30. So it really comes down to the kind of people that you're interacting, if they understand or if they're in the same shoes. For most athletes, that's not the case, because the next person that you're interacting with is not necessarily going to understand where you're coming from. Sometimes they might look at it as, "Arey, but this is unnecessary," or sometimes they might look at it as in awe, as if, "Oh, that's so nice," but both of them are not conducive for you, because you want it to be as normal for you as possible, because this is the path that you've chosen and you want to try and make it as even across the board. So that's why for such athletes, if you want to interact with similar minded people, that's when you'll be a little bit more grounded, because otherwise you'll think that what I'm doing is not normal, or the moment that thought creeps in, then you think of too high or too low of yourself, which again is not conducive for high performance sport.
Right. And then there is the outcome part of process also, right? I think sometimes the results may not come your way, and I'm sure you've seen that's part of being an athlete, that while you're practicing hard, you're doing everything in your control, sometimes the results eventually of a competition may not come that way. And at Athlete First Foundation, I think that's what we are trying to balance. We are trying to help athletes navigate that journey where the consistency of the results or the outcome starts coming. But just because they've worked hard for 6 months and the result doesn't come, doesn't mean that they have to completely start afresh and change everything. So I'm sure you've been through your share of heartbreaks in terms of you work really hard towards a competition or towards a season and didn't pan out the way you had planned.
Yeah.
So how do you take these kind of setbacks? Because I think again it's a very important part of mindset from perseverance, or let's say there's a term called reboundability in sports psychology, that how do you keep getting back to it again and again. So how do you think about it?
So it's very interesting because in my experience, there's more bad days in sport than good days. But it all depends on if you look at it as a bad day or if you look at it as just another opportunity for me to try and, okay, another one of those methods which I tried, it didn't work out. Okay, let's move on to what's next. I was listening to this, I think it was an Olympic swimmer where, she was talking about her coach telling her that there's this rule of thirds in sport where a third of the time it's going to be very average, a third of the time in your Olympic 4-year cycle is going to be the best practices, and a third of your practices are going to be the worst practices. So every time you have a really bad practice, just imagine or hope that, okay, this was part of that 1/3 section, so we're going to throw this practice in that bracket. If you have a great practice, you're going to throw that 1/3 section in that great practice bracket, and most of your days are going to be very average, so that's going to be in the 1/3 bracket. So ultimately the whole point that I'm trying to make is you don't have to have great practices for the majority of your duration to make it to an Olympic Games. What you have to have is practices. Ultimately in that 1/3, she's still practicing, she's still showing up. So irrespective of the results, and again, like no elite athlete or sports person, if it's only the goal that drives their passion for the sport, then 9 out of 10 times you're going to fail, because if your only incentive of going through the whole labor of going to the track, XYZ practice, gym, is to eventually get a medal, what happens the day you get that medal? Does your sport stop that day? Because I've had that feeling, and I'm sure a lot of other athletes have this feeling, to where I was so caught up, or I was so focused on trying to win that one medal at the Asian Games. The moment I won that medal, the next day I felt something very empty inside me. I said, but this is the goal that I'm dreaming about since I realized that I want to do this seriously. I want to take this sport up seriously. Now I've achieved that. So what's next? Does this end my sporting career? For some, that might look like post-Olympics depression is a very famous, phenomenon that occurs with a lot of elite athletes, is when they achieve their goal, when they get to the Olympics, well, yes, after that, what? Life doesn't stop there. And if you want to continue in sport, you have to start back again, just like the 12th fail movie, restart. Exactly. You have to start from zero. So is that something that you're passionate about? And this is where the goal, if it's a goal driven motivation, then it becomes extremely difficult, rather than over the course of time, if you really enjoy what you do. And it's very hard for you to stay at home on that Sunday, and those 24 hours of a Sunday or a rest day look like, this is the longest day of my life. If only I could, maybe just walk around the track, just go and touch the high jump bed, maybe just feel the shot in my hand. Those are the kind of days when, you really understand why you're doing sport. Exactly. It's not about winning a medal. Yes, obviously it is. Ultimately, that's what matters. But then the bottom line is, as an older athlete, that can't be your only reason why you're showing up every day. It also has to be, I just love this, I want to do this, and I chose this for myself, and that's why I'm going to do it. So
right. No, I think I'm so glad that you mentioned this, because that was the last of the the most important, but I have saved it for the last, the enjoyment part of it, because I feel that you can't be doing anything till there is an element of enjoyment in it. I think that keeps the spark alive. And off days, post season, a lot of Indian athletes don't know what post season is, where you completely shut off for a week or 2 weeks after a very draining season, just to have that rejuvenation of sorts, because you may not realize it, but your mind and body need it. Now I want to come back to that reel of yours, which you had put up, or a story which was 3 or 4 days back, and there were 3 phrases in it. If you remember it, for me it will be better because I remember it in part, but there were 3 distinct phases which I wanted you to also explain, because I think they explain a lot in those 9 words. There's a lot of explanation.
I don't remember exactly what I put out, but I think it was along the lines of, just because you train hard doesn't mean you're going to be the next best athlete. And smart work is obviously more important than hard work. And there has to be a plan. There has to be, some sort of a direction, a process, if you may call it.
You mentioned motivation is not consistency, or something on the lines of comparing motivation is not enough, but consistency is the more important thing. If you can just elaborate on that one, I think that was a
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And this, I think, goes back to that swimming Olympian example where, doesn't matter if she's motivated, because obviously in that 1/3 rule of practices, she's probably extremely motivated in those good days when she had really good 1/3 segment of practices. But then in the majority of the days, she wasn't motivated, or maybe she just didn't have a good practice. And if that is your whole goal, is again going back to, if your goal is to win a medal, or if you're motivated, you're going to show up. And this ties very well with, my aunt who's at home trying to lose weight, and for her, motivation is a very big thing, because she's a general, like a normal lady who's trying to lose weight. She goes to the gym, and once in 3 days she says, "Arey, but today's Christmas," or next New Year's gonna come in next 10 days. "Arey, but this is vacation period." So that's very motivation driven, and I understand that, because maybe that might not be the sole goal in her life. If she loses weight, great. If she doesn't, that's not the end of the world. But as a professional athlete, if you're relying on motivation, then you're not a professional athlete in my eye, because where's the professional part of it? Yes, you're an athlete. You can maybe switch the professional with wannabe athlete, but I think if you're professional, then everything has to be professional, and that's where it doesn't matter if it snows. You have to find a way to train if that's what you're supposed to do on that given day. I understand modifications, but if you have to go through snow to get to your practice facility, well, so be it. I mean, that's, you chose this path. So if this is what should come from within, and this is where it's not about the motivation, because I can guarantee you that not every day is going to be the same. After a certain point, you might be extremely passionate. You might be the most passionate person in the world, but there is going to be a point where you realize, I don't want to wake up out of bed today because yesterday I had a really hard practice session. And if the next day is a day that you have to get out of bed and do something, so it must be that way, because otherwise that's where the consistency side of things kicks in. And ultimately at the end of 4 years, nobody asks you how many good practices you had.
Right.
The only thing that matters is, in those 4 years, how many times did you show up? Because on that given day, everybody's of same caliber, everybody's going to do the best of their abilities, but do you have it in you to dig as deep as you can on that given day to be able to be among the top 3 in the world? So that's what I think sport is all about, especially at the highest level. Motivation is great. Obviously it makes things easy. Adrenaline makes things easy, but out of 365 days, how many days are you going to get lucky with motivation? Most days not. So be prepared for those days.
Motivation may be up or down, but I think in the base, we talked about enjoyment. So you need to be enjoying it, so that even if you've had days where you're not feeling motivated enough, at the base of it, you know that you want to do this. Yeah. And that's where you keep up the consistency, right?
Yeah, and ultimately it's a deal with yourself. This is how I look at it. It's a deal with yourself. Nobody asked you to be a professional athlete. You chose this because you like this. If you don't like it, I mean, stop and move on in life.
Right.
But if you've struck that deal with yourself, then I think the only way to honor that deal is do whatever in your power it might be to try and achieve that goal that nobody set for yourself. You have set that for yourself. So, I mean, now you're lying to yourself. So I think it becomes very simple if you think of it that way. And there's no amount of commitment, motivation, but just showing up every day is what matters. And that can only happen, like you correctly said, if you love what you do, if you enjoyed, if that makes you happy, if you're able to go to bed happy. That's what, and a lot of these days stack up, and then one fine day you look back and you've won an Asian Games medal or an Olympic medal. So
great. I think this has been really, insightful, coming directly from, from an elite athlete such as you, because it helps put in perspective for a lot of athletes watching what it is all about. We are short on time, and we have to finish also. We covered most of the points, but I want to get back to the very first thing you mentioned, because what happens at the end of the day, we are talking about all of these things which are critical to high performance and to excellence. But every time there is that sinking feeling a young or upcoming athlete and then there is that, what about the funds? What about the money? And you mentioned in the beginning that that it is not the only thing. But sometimes when you are in a dearth of funds, where you feel that okay, these other athletes are able to go and compete at so many other places, and that's why they're getting ranking points, etc. Then in your mind, you're always thinking that money or the financial support is the only solution. And one of the challenges we've faced, when we're trying to help athletes, is that while some of them may understand why the other things are important, for them the financial part becomes the most important. But then all of a sudden that becomes the only thing. So what would be your advice to athletes to balance this out? Obviously the financials are important, but not let it be the be all of everything, because just going and playing competitions because you have the financial support and getting better ranking may not mean that 5 years down the line you are the best possible athlete you could be. Right? So it's a very tricky thing, it's a very sensitive and personal thing, because if you don't have the funds, it's good to talk about preparation, training, etc., all of that, but we also know that is not the only thing. So if you can just probably and kind of try to give an advice of sorts to athletes who may be facing a financial crunch, and may feel that the economic part of it is really pulling them back, and that's the main and the only thing.
And absolutely, because like we may talk about all sorts for the last 1 hour. We've been talking about motivation, no motivation, commitment. A lot of the people who want to be elite athletes already have navigated all of this pretty much. So now we are talking to that audience who have everything sorted out. The only thing that's pushing back is funds, and this is a very normal situation scenario where like everything being said and done, ultimately if you're not able to fund your trip to go to a certain training camp that you're extremely motivated about, that's going to come and affect your preparations for the next major competition. And this is unfortunately or fortunately, this is how sports work. It works all over the world like this, and this is what it's all about. The way an athlete can deal with this, in my mind, is, and again, this is one of those learnings in sport that you learn, is controlling the controllables. What can you control? You can control your preparation. You can control trying to reach out to people. You can do everything in your power, putting in proposals, or at least working your way to the point where you're inducted in certain schemes, or you're getting selected by certain people. The beauty of the world is, if you truly want something, then people, the right people or the right organizations will eventually find you. Best example is a particular javelin thrower who was just identified using Twitter. So if you really have it in you, and if you really think that it's possible, and if you keep doing, or if you keep putting your due, if you keep putting your one coin in a jar every day, eventually that jar's going to be full. Eventually there's going to be somebody who's going to identify you. So the less you start thinking about the funds, and more you just start thinking about all the opportunities that you have at the moment and how you can best do it, eventually there's going to be an Athletes First Foundation that's going to come and identify you, and that's going to come your way. So from an athlete's perspective, I think it's very important to keep your mind out of these things as much as you can, because obviously this is the harsh reality of sport and this is what's going to happen. But there is going to be an opportunity, there's going to be an option that comes to you. But for me, I think more importantly than athletes, this message should reach donors, should reach similar foundations, because you are in that position where you can make and break an athlete's dream. And if we want Olympic medals, again, that might be secondary, but for me, I want a healthy India. I want a healthy country where everybody has access to sports. Sports is not just a way of achieving medals, but a healthy lifestyle. And when that happens, it becomes very easy, or there's a pathway for individual Olympic champions or individual outliers to pop up. And the more we have, the more wide base we have, the easier it is for individual outliers to pop up. And when that happens, it becomes very easy to identify those champions, and that's how sports should grow in any country. And the responsibility rests with us as AFF, and obviously athletes who want to make sure that they're able to achieve their dream to the best of their potential.
Thank you so much, Tejaswin. I think, as I said, it's a very insightful conversation. You are just realized you're leaving for the US in a couple of weeks, but I hope that we can do, I think it'll take 8 to 10 podcasts for us to cover what we want to talk about. But yeah, message to whoever is watching: if you're a fan of the sport, if you are a corporate, if you're someone who loves sport, we are trying to do the best for upcoming athletes, young athletes, and the overall Indian sporting ecosystem. With TJ as a mentor, I think we gain a lot of strength, and there's a lot of work we have, we are looking forward to do. And if you can contribute in any way, whether it is monetary or through some kind of logistical support, please reach out to us so that we can make this a comprehensive long-term program for athletes and for Indian sports. So once again, TJ, thank you so much for your time. I know training is training time, the sacrosanct, routines are sacrosanct, and we've delayed you just by a few minutes. But all the best for the upcoming year, and for the Asian Games. And I think this is just the beginning of where you take your flight as an individual athlete. And all of us from Athlete First Foundation, from Sporting Ethos, wish you the very best. And also, we know that we will have a lot to gain from your experience and insights. And I'm sure we will have a lot to learn from you in this journey together with Athlete First Foundation. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.